interesting look at things that happen to us in life. He said, we don't really get the chance to decide what happens to us. Things come into our life. Some of them are welcome and some of them are not. But it's not really up to us to determine what they are. But what is up to us is our response to those things that happen. So anything can happen, he said. And the way that we respond is sitting here in the palm of our hand. We can get swept away by some kind of experience, good, bad, or neutral. Or we can thoughtfully respond, appropriately respond, spiritually respond to what happens to us in life. Most people don't know that they have the ability to choose their response. They just react. That's the common human experience. Something happens to us and we react to it. If it's good, our reaction is positive and sweet and kindly, and if it's not so good, maybe our reaction is equal to the negativity that came at us. But for spiritual people, the reaction is really important. How we react is really important. If we react in an ordinary way, we just allow the swirl of karmas to wash upon our shore and wash back and wash upon our shore, and we're in this kind of uncontrolled, helpless state, so to speak. But for spiritual people, you don't want to be in that. You want to actively learn to deal with the karmas. We have a book called Karma Management. Very cool book. It goes through a bunch of ways that we manage our karmas. The important thing for this discussion tonight is that you have the power in the palm of your hand to deal with all of your relationships in the world. Relationships are in this third dimension that Swami was describing. And relationships are a big deal in the human experience, as we all know. And they can be helpful to our spiritual work, and they can thwart our spiritual work also. Relationships can. And one of the things that a spiritual person should do, try to do, is to bring into his or her sphere those people who support and encourage and help their inner life, their spiritual life. And to, quietly remove the negativity if it's happening. I mean, in your life, you've already winnowed away, most of the dross. But a lot of people don't. They don't. They just go from experience to experience. I myself am working actively. I am confessing this to you. I'm working with the principle that everything that's wrong with you is actually wrong with me. So I have a couple of relationships that I would like to make better in my life. But I can't. They're beyond my reach. They're beyond my ability, partly because the other person doesn't want to have the relationship that I hope for. So I have an ideal of how our relationship could be if we both were on, working on it, but the other person doesn't have that same ideal. And I don't even know why. And this particular relationship has been a thorn in my side for a long time, actually. Because I wanted to to be better. And I want to feel better about it. And I've tried a whole bunch of things to fix it. I'm remembering one of the things that I tried for another problem. I have a problem with people who leave a mess in the sink. So you have 18 men in a monastery, and they're all, working together and going and getting their coffee and their lunch and their breakfast and their dinner. And, in an ideal world that I have, we all leave the sink in a nicer form than when we went up to the sink. But that's not everybody's ideal, right? So I'd go to the sink and there'd be a dirty dish in the sink. I'd say, how the mind works. Why can't they clean their dish? It's so simple. So easy to do. So I went on like that for a couple of years about dirty dishes in the sink. And then I decided, wait a minute. I'm not going to live my life thinking about dirty dishes. That's not why I was born. And I can't go and correct a person, because then that kind of gives friction to the relationship. So I did something that worked for me. You'll laugh at this, but I started leaving my dish in the sink. I wanted to feel like that person felt, or people felt, when they did that. And it had kind of a magical salve experience to me, because then I was one of them. Instead of, I'm the guy who likes the clean sink, and you're the guy who puts things in the sink. Now we're both the guys who do things in the sink. And that kind of, it was a release for me. To think that it made me the same as him. And being the same as him, I could stop criticizing him, because then I'm criticizing myself, right? So that worked for the dirty dishes. The one that I'm working on now is more subtle than dirty dishes, and not an easy thing. You can come to these relationships where you can't talk about it because they don't want to talk about it. Or if you did talk about it, they would take it the wrong way. That can also happen. And misunderstand what you're trying to do. So, well, I'm trying to make this relationship right. Well, actually what you're trying to do is, fix me. And there's that whole dynamic that can go on. So, just for the last 2 months, I've been working on this principle that the reaction to all of the experiences in the palm of this hand right here. So it's requiring me to totally embrace the friction of the relationship as my own, not allowing myself to project even an ounce of the problem onto the other person. What if I, inside this world that I call me, can solve that in different ways? One way is I can maybe do better on my side of the relationship in ways that I might be unaware of. Maybe I'm part of the problem. There's no maybe about it, right? It goes both ways. And so I'm working really hard to manage this karma with this particular relationship that I have. And it's working. It's actually working pretty good, because it's taking it all back here. It's bringing all the control and all the responsibility back to where it really belongs, which is my universe. I was born to do a certain thing, and that's not to project my problems onto other people, or to ask other people to live the way I want them to live. And so we have to take full responsibility for our relationships is kind of the way that I look at this particular issue. And embrace them as ours, not as theirs. Not outside. This is an inside problem, not an outside problem. And that's hard to do. It's a little bit hard to do. Because you have to, first of all, detach yourself from the problem enough to ferret out what's going on and what you could do to make it better, to make yourself happy. What if this person was sent by Shiva to teach me something? Gurudeva had a beautiful saying. He said, no man is my friend, no man is my enemy, but all men are my teachers. So what if this person is here to teach me something important that I need to learn in this birth? And therefore he becomes not my nemesis, but my teacher, my mentor. He reveals something about me that I need to know, that I didn't know before. And I'm working on that very diligently with this relationship, to take the whole thing, and anytime I get back to this idea that I want this to be better, I disengage from that. And I don't want this to be better. I want me to be better at dealing with this. Me to be better reacting to this. And that's a work in progress, I will say. So we have, can we put the things on the screen? Is that something?
Yes,
What?
the cord, the HDMI cord.
Cord is right there? Oh, how efficient is that?
Just watch out for the flower.
I'm going to put something up on the screens here in a second. This is a photo from a couple of days ago, actually. Well, a week ago now, since we've been on the road for a while. This is a Hanuman statue that's at the temples. How many have seen this Hanuman? Good. And more of you will see it in the days and years ahead. So Hanuman comes with a karmic story about this, kind of this idea that we're talking about, how to deal with karma. So the story is that Gurudeva had a vision of Hanuman years ago, and Hanuman was this very muscular, buff, powerful being in this vision that he had, and because Hanuman, of course, is strength itself, so to speak. And Gurudeva wanted us to make a murti that showed this, his vision of it, of Hanuman, make him very buff. So we went to work, and because we were in the stone carving process with the Iraivan Temple, we had a team in South India carve a 13-foot tall black granite Hanuman that looked a little bit like this, actually quite a bit like this. And it took 4 men 7 years to carve this thing out of stone. And then it went to our work site in Bengaluru, and Jiva, our manager, looked at it and he said, well, we need to work on a little more, make it more refined. So he worked on it for 18 months, and then he shipped it to Kuwait. So it was out on a pallet, laying on its back, and I would go touch his feet every morning, say hi. He was kind of getting ready to be installed. And I went out one morning, and he had broken in half. Just amazing. The whole, his feet and legs were, and mountain were this side, and the rest of him was this side, and he was broken in half. So this is, as you might imagine, a big loss. A loss of artistry, a loss of human effort and time, a loss of money, and lots of a glorious artifact that we had hoped to have at the monastery. So we said, well, what would Gurdeva do? And he had this beautiful idea that if you respond to a disaster in high consciousness, in a positive way, you can turn any kind of problem in your life into a boon and a blessing. It's all about how you respond, he would teach us. It's not about what happened to you. It's about your reaction to what happened to you. Anything, he said, can happen, and maybe will happen, and that if you respond in the right way, you can do this little alchemy, turning disaster into a boon. So we thought about that for a few days, and we brought over our sculptress from the Big Island, Holly Young is her name, and she molded the whole stone statue in 65 different little molds. Then she took those molds and put them into wax, and then she took the wax and worked the wax in a way that the carvers couldn't work the stone, because stone isn't as amenable to detail as wax is, of course. And so she was able to bring the stone artistry to another level of artistry, far more sweet and elegant than the stone was. And in case you're wondering, after a whole bunch of discussion with pundits in India, we interred the broken stone in the earth. So he's over by the temple down in the earth, and he's going to cause a lot of consternation 1,000 years from now when archaeologists find him. And they're going to wonder, what? We didn't know that the Hawaiians worshipped him. So, we took her wax, we sent it to Colorado, where we were yesterday morning, and they turned that, after another 18 months, into this beautiful bronze masterpiece. He is, in my judgment, like the most elegant Hanuman that you could imagine that there is. And of course, he's got our temple in his left hand, and the Gurudeva's idea for that was, oh, but he's going, if people ask in the future, how did this temple, this agamic granite temple, get here on this remote island? And you say, well, it's simple. Hanuman brought it. Put it down. So we know that we did the right thing. In other words, we know that we did the little alchemic transformation of a disaster to a blessing, because today we can actually say we're really glad that it broke. At the moment that it dawned on us what happened, we weren't happy in that moment. But because of our reaction to what happened, we made it so that we can say, thank God that broke. And then you know for sure that you've overcome the disaster when you can say something like that, right? So, anything in our life, anything in your life that happens, you can take it as Saiva's opportunity for something even better. Somebody bangs into your Mercedes, causes you $8,000 worth of damage, and you go and buy a better car. and you turn a problem into a boon in your life, a little bit of a blessing. And we can do that with anything. So as soon as something happens, somebody bangs into your Mercedes, at that very moment, before you react, because if you react, there's going to be some arguments and everything. Before you react, say to yourself, here is a chance for something I wasn't expecting, but could be really wonderful in my life. What is that going to be? And then you immediately go to work. And if you can start doing this, anything can happen without causing you grief, and causing you emotional reactions, because life can do that. You banged my car. This is an expensive car. I spent a lot of money for this car. I polished the car this morning, and you can go that way, or inside yourself you can say, thanks. I don't know yet what's going to be better in my life, but something's going to come of this, because this is really bad. And so that's part of karma management in our life. And we can all use those little tools, let's call them tools, to deal with the major things that come along in life. So I'm going to take you on a little tour, I think. Got so many folders. How do you know how to navigate these things? So, first thing I'm going to show is some photos that we took just the other day. Show you. So, this is where the temple is a week ago. I've been landscaping all around, as you know or can see, for years, but I couldn't landscape within about 80 feet of the temple because trucks were coming and going as a construction zone. So now, for the first time, we can move the landscaping right up to the temple base, and that's what we're doing right now. Yesterday they installed our first irrigation system, sprinkler system, and we're going to be planting and landscaping. The landscaping around it is very complex and lush and tropical, but the landscaping near the temple is going to be very austere, kind of simple, so that the temple is the center of attention and not the garden. We had a Buddhist landscape fellow come to the monastery years ago, and he was helping, kind of teaching me how to do it, and he's really good. I mean, he writes high-end books on Japanese garden design and things. And he told me, I said, I want to tell you something about my little experience touring around with you this morning. He said, the temple is unbending, it's permanent, it's masculine. The garden around it is soft, it's healing, it's beautiful, it's full of prana and love, it's feminine. Those of you who haven't been there, this is the same team that did the Hanuman for us. Created, Holly and I did all of the design with their chisels and moved the stones and marked the stones. And you walk around and you kind of feel like you're in Swami here did. Open with.
They're actually unedited.
Unedited short drone shots. They're very cool, actually. Here we go. So this is going to pan through the garden a little bit and then end up at the temple, which is close by. Lots of tropical lushness over there. That's the world's largest palm tree right there. That's our Rishi Valley Pond. I should put some music on this. And I think you're going to see Tanja Sivanathan, who's helping me installing the sprinkler system. That's him walking there. He just emailed me a little while ago that they turned the sprinklers on. Yeah, successfully did that.
That's me realizing I'm about to hit a tree.
Yeah, he almost crashed the drone there.
So do you like mastery with the drone.
He's actually very good.
Yeah,
at
this
it.
is very good.
He's actually brought the drone out of this space and brought it into my office. That's how good he is. Okay, there's that one, then there's another short one. Want to see another one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, let's talk
Oh, well, this is cool. This is not on the menu tonight, but he took a time lapse from, this is from my office. And this is the sunset.
Just that.
Oh, wow.
Flooring tiles from China that just arrived, and this whole prakaram that is kind of gray concrete right now will be rose-colored stone. And
It's also granite.
yeah, it's granite stone, beautiful stone. In a few months, I think, at least starting soon, right?
Very soon.
Yeah, supposed to be starting soon.
When is the inauguration of the temple?
Ha ha. You know,
Oh,
I very sincerely promised a family that it would be open in 2012.
You think you can do what, like, say, I was all one dog.
So, Shiva knows.
Yes.
We don't really know. But it's getting very close.
Yeah.
Publishing team, and we do all of the magazine that you may know of, and the books and the artwork and things. And we're working now on a very important but small book. It's Bodhinava's commentaries on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And he's done a whole series of interpretations. We were talking about it this morning a little bit. And the unique thing about this book is that it's the first time that the South Indian Saiva Siddhanta philosophy has been brought into the Yoga Sutras. Almost all interpretations, virtually all, are done by Advaita Vedanta philosophers and leaders. And so they give it a tone that is in consonance with their philosophy, of course. But we have a little bit of a different view of some of the things. And so for example, there's an important thing in the Yoga Sutras called Ishvara Pranidhana. And this is basically worship of Brahman's Ishvara. And most of the Advaita philosophers, when they come to this part, kind of interpret, as we said this morning, oh, you know, that's just a symbol of your own inner divinity. That's what we're worshiping, you know, the divine within. They kind of poo-poo the idea that there is in fact a glorious, perfect Mahadeva that's real, that's not an intellectualization and it's not a symbol, but it's God. And so what we have in the Saiva Siddhanta philosophy, that's very important. But the worship of Shiva is equally important to the meditation on Shiva. You know, inner worship, I call it, and outer worship. And they're equally, they're two parts of divine life, of spiritual life. And you can't, if you just take the one, you're missing something, you know, the fullness of it's not there from the Saiva Siddhanta point of view. So in this series, I'm going to take you through 10 works of art that we commissioned in Kerala, from Kerala. And in every one of them we have Shiva represented to make our point, to grind the point in. So in this case, Shiva is there in the form of the Sada Shiva riding on a Nandi, And this is the world's only flying Nandi that I'm aware of. I've never seen Nandi with wings until now. But this is, of course, Patanjali in his traditional pose under the tree. And if you look closely, you will see Shiva looking at you. Anyone see that? What if I said there were two eyes in there that looked like moons?
Oh, yeah. I can see it.
Explain what you see.
The light in the middle, right there on one side, and the other eyes on the other side.
Can we all see that? It's pretty subtle. So there's a, you see,
Oh, yeah.
see that eye there, and then there's an eye, that's Shiva looking back at you.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's going to be the cover of our book, and then this is one of the pieces, and this one is specifically relating to the path to Shiva. Shiva is the brilliant white lingam there at the end. And the seeker here is stepping in the footsteps. You can see the big footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to portray that we follow the great ones. We don't invent the path all anew. We follow the well-trodden path. This is one about the kleshas. You may know there's 5 kleshas in the Yoga Sutras, which are the obstacles to meditation. And this yogi has ascended above the kleshas on his magic carpet. And that's the artist's interpretation of Kailas is that golden mountain there. And this is our take on a very famous image of Buddha under a banyan tree where he goes to become enlightened. And as he's sitting there, he gets all kinds of temptations that come at him. First of all, on the bottom from the Naraka Loka, the devilish world, he gets all of these antagonisms, you know, you can't do this, you know, why don't you go back to the village and help some poor person instead of selfishly sitting under this, you know, how those things go. And then he's got beautiful maidens to tempt him and seduce him, and he has to resist all of that. And then he has rich people and family people and pundits, and they're all trying to take him away from his enterprise. And he has to stay the course and use his willpower to do that. Then this one is important in that it includes what we were just talking about. So these are 3 basically practices that Patanjali talks about. On the left is tapas, and we have these 3 yogis in the Himalayan ice caves with a little rabbit getting warm in his lap. And then in the middle is the swadhyaya, which is self-study, which is kind of what we were just talking about, you know, things like karma control and knowledge of the spiritual path. And some would study Sanskrit for this part. And then the one on the right is the Ishvara Paridhana, which is Pranidhana, which is the worship of Shiva. And it totally perplexes me, frankly, that most commentators just take their hand and put it on top of that one on the right and forget about it. It's like Patanjali never wrote about it, but he did. And then we have Shiva here as the most relaxed Ardhanarishwara that you ever saw. This one's unusual in the series. The yogi is like the balance of energies. So he's Shiva and Shakti. He's sun and moon are in his eyes, fire and air in his nostrils, and he's balanced the Ida and the Pingala forces. And one of the things that is spoken of in the Yoga Sutras is that when this happens deep enough and long enough, the yogi comes into certain powers, siddhis. And Patanjali speaks of 25 siddhis in his slokas, but we put 8 of them. And a little bit hard to see, but from left to right, we have invisibility, seeing the past and the future, physical strength, so he's got this yogi holding a mountain up with his pinky, remote viewing, seeing things at a great distance, astrally, power over the forces of nature. Our own Yoga Swami, it was said, could go out during a drought in Yalpanam, Sri Lanka, and the farmers were all suffering, and he could raise his fist to the clouds, and it would rain the next day. And the next one is the ability to enter into the body of another human being and actually be inside of them consciously. And then languages, understanding all languages, including the languages of animals, is a power. And then the last one is like Saiva Vidya, it's an all-encompassing cosmic knowledge. And this one is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, the progression. And one of the things we did here, the artist and I created the movement of time in the piece, because mostly people think you can do all of this in a 10-day vipassana retreat, you know. They don't realize that this work, this profound work, it takes a lifetime. It takes a lifetime, and then this, so you're seeing the lifetime here on the canvas from left to right. And this is the only one with Bodhinath in it. He's there on the right bottom corner, and he's celebrating the liberation of one of his shishya, one of his disciples, who is so elated at today's meditation that he's dancing. And then Shiva got excited and started dancing with him, and all of the devas are up there playing the music for their dance. This one has a lot in it. This is Bhairava Shiva, of course, who rides on a dog, and he has all the devas on his strands of wild hair. And the yogi is disappearing himself into Parashivam. So Parashivam is depicted here as kind of a black hole, you can say, a void, sunya. And you can see how the artist has shown the body just dissolving and flowing from physicality into spirituality there. And this one's the gunas, the 3 gunas that are spoken of in Yoga Sutras. You all know about that. So that's 10 canvases, and those will go into this book, and you'll all be able to get this book.
When is it released? Published?
Ooh, one of these promises, right? Am I going to do it again, or am I going to learn my lesson? We're working on it, and we're pretty far along. The art has taken about 2.5 or 3 years.
It's beautiful, that's
Oh,
nice.
he's a genius.
Lovely pictures.
Yeah, he's a master Kerala muralist, actually. They paint murals on the walls in Kerala temples. But we captured him, and yeah, he's amazing. Totally.
The idea is yours from here.
The what?
The idea how to represent it is yours.
Yeah, you would laugh if you saw my sketches for the ideas behind this. He's so good, he can take something that's very childish looking, because I'm not an artist. I have good ideas, but I can't go anywhere near this. So I just sketch things out in this almost stick figure way with lots of instructions on the side. This is this and this is that, and then he does his magic on it. This is a canvas we just got a couple of days ago from another artist in Chennai for a series that we're doing for the magazine on the Guru Shishya system we were talking about this morning. So we're doing a whole story on this genius idea of Guru Shishya that exists, in its best form as far as I know in India. And, so this particular one is depicting the many kinds of gurus that there are. We have an idea of a guru. He's kind of a picture-perfect fellow with a beard, and he's very well behaved, and he's very knowledgeable and sweet-talking. But that's not all gurus. There are gurus who are mountain gurus who never speak a word. There are gurus who do just great tapas. There are gurus who have big ashrams and wealth around them. There's gurus who scold you and throw rocks at you and send you away from them. There's gurus who hug everybody, who like the hugging Amma. What a wonderful example she is. And so this is trying to show that there's many forms of the guru, and don't get stuck on one. He doesn't have to look like your idea of a guru. He may be maybe even more profound if he's just sitting in a cave somewhere and doesn't have disciples, doesn't want disciples. Maybe that's the greatest guru that we'll ever meet. And we have, in our tradition, we have Chelapa Swami was such a guru. I use the term saint and sage to describe this. So the saintly looking gurus that are picture perfect are saints, but the Chelapa Swamis are sages, and he was wild. He almost never washed his dhoti veshti, so it was kind of grungy, and he was disheveled, and he lived under a bilva tree in the temple compound, and he actually did throw rocks at people who tried to worship him. And one day his disciples all got together, they tied him to a tree and worshipped him. And then they let him go.
We allowed that.
No, I mean, he was overwhelmed by it. But they weren't going to go without worshiping their guru. And he had this very unusual habit. He would say one thing in Tamil language for a year. Like for a whole year, it would be the only sentence that he spoke. And these things are written down. So, for example, he would say,
It was all finished long ago.
Or Sarvam Siva Mayan, simple thing like that. Siva is all. And then people would come to him and he would say Sarvam Siva Mayan. Sarvam Siva Mayan. February, March, April, Sarvam Siva Mayan. I mean, that's unusual, right? How do you ever meet somebody like that? So yes, this is all the different forms that Shiva creates in his gurus. Bodhinath is about to have his 80th birthday, coming up on October 15th, and I commissioned a portrait in India to do a new portrait, which Bodhinath has never seen, and he won't see until October 15th. That'll be one of his gifts on his 80th birthday coming up. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's anything you want to talk about.
Things you talked about, right? You didn't mention enough about or anything about the idol worship. So there are lots of people that do idol worship and they believe that that's it. You don't really go beyond. So is that like an example of your third dimension, or is that, how do you see that?
So you're saying there are people
Who interact with idols?
whose only spiritual endeavor is go to the temple and worship the murti and go home.
Right.
And they trust that that's sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, we would say no, that's not sufficient. That just as we say no, that it's actually not sufficient that you just do yoga meditation either. It's not sufficient. The way that Saiva Siddhanta looks at this is very interesting. It looks at God, Shiva, as totally in charge of the universe. He is the universe that he created. That all of this is nothing but Shivaness. If we could see it from the top of our head, we would see Shiva in all, and in ourselves as well. And therefore, the final and most marvelous revelations and realizations come with Shiva's grace. They don't just come from effort. So most of the Hindu world looks at it that if we meditate enough and learn enough and strive enough and do enough sadhana, we'll get there. Saiva Siddhanta says, do all of that. That all is extremely important preparation for the moment that Shiva gives you enlightenment. But his grace is the ultimate gift and is required for Nirvikalpa Samadhi to take place. That's a very different idea than you get from the Advaita Vedanta point of reference. So, it's not enough that they go to the temple and worship the Murti, but it's important preparation because that person will have some kind of experience in the temple. We used to take a lot of people to India, and Western people would have these awesome visions when they were at Chidambaram worshiping, and that was a trigger to a whole lifetime of inner work. And so this person you're talking about, fictitious person, will probably have some kind of inner, marvelous vision, and that will take him or her probably into the yoga field, and then they'll have both, because we need both. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening so carefully and greeting the Swamis from a little island in the middle of nowhere. We're all old and do you all know Sahana? We'll try. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunatu Sahaviriyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. You don't know me that well. And I said, no, I may know you better than you know yourself. There's a perfection deep inside of everything that is Shivaness. And we just have to get there, and touch it, and reveal it, unfold it, and develop it. And, it's a perfect world. You're a perfect soul inside of a perfect world. How perfect is that? We have some vibhuti if anyone wants to have some vibhuti. You want to all stand up? You might feel more comfortable. So I brought you a book. Brought him one and I brought you one. Since your brother is doing all this work, I thought you should understand what he's doing.
Thank you, thank you.